Hey, it's Alex coming to you from Brooklyn, New York. Drinking a cup of iced coffee. I was drinking it through a straw, but I decided to take the straw off. Anyway, so I was on a client call yesterday. It was Uber for something. I can't tell you exactly what it was because of, an NDA. Um, but it was, let's just say it was Uber for dog walkers. And he had a question about which platform he should choose. He came to us and he was like, I want to build Uber for dog walkers and I want to do it on all three platforms, right? Android, iOS. I want to have a web version, admin panel, all this stuff. Um, but he hadn't really tested anything in the market and he had limited budget, which I see a lot of times. So I wanted to help you if you're having a similar situation. Maybe you want to build on all three platforms. I want to help you decide which platform to choose. So we have three choices mainly when you're building an application. You have Android, uh, you have iOS, and you have web, responsive web. So the pros of Android: there are way more users in the market for Android. It's on like 90% of phones. That's a made-up statistic, but it's on so many phones. It's also easier to get an app approved in the marketplace. Google's approval process for Android is like 2 days, maybe even a little less. And I've seen apps go live within hours after submitting them. So if you have kind of like a sketchy sort of app that you think might violate some things and won't get approved by Apple, Android's definitely the way to go. Some cons: it is more expensive to develop for Android. And that's just because Android developers are in higher demand, and also you have to support a bunch of different screen sizes because all the phones are different screens, and the QA quality assurance process of testing is a little more complex, some would say. Next up is iOS. Pros of iOS: the users that do use the platform spend more time in apps than Android users. They also spend more money in apps. They're more likely to make an in-app purchase. I'll link in the description to the study that I'm talking about here. And also, they spend more time on their phones in general. iPhone users and iPad users just love uh, their phones. Cons of that, though: with iOS, you're going to get less total number of people using it. Less people are actually on iPhones than they are on all the other phones. Um, However, iOS is my default go-to suggestion. Like if you're building a mobile app, it's better to start with iOS just because there's a higher chance that someone's going to pay you money for things. And we're building businesses here. We're not building toys. So I try to get people to revenue as quick as possible. And iOS, if you're going to do native mobile, iOS is the best way to go. You could also build on both platforms at the same time, which allows you to attack the entire marketplace. Right? You get on everybody's phones. You're on everyone's phones. Which, how can that be bad, right? Well, the con is if people don't want a feature that you're building. Like let's say you have like 10 features in the app. So you build them for iOS, you build them for Android, and you launch them out in the market, and you find out that your users don't want like 80% of your features. Well, all of a sudden, now you just built features for iOS and Android, so you had to pay twice the development cost for a whole bunch of features you didn't need. Um, so it'll be twice as expensive to change it if you do cross-platform. The other option is responsive web, which is like a web app. The pros of that are web is available everywhere. Any smartphone could use it. You could build it for web, and then people on Android can use it. People on iOS can use it. It's also the cheapest development cost because HTML5 and CSS3, um, and JavaScript, all three of those languages have been around for a while. So there's lots of devs just waiting to jump on top of that. Um, so it's the cheapest one and the easiest to make changes to cross-platform. Cons, though: web, uh, it's not available offline. So let's say you're building a news app or something, and your users are in the train, and you expect them to browse your website. It's just not going to work because there's no internet down there. Um, and the web experience could be limited. There's some stuff that doesn't really work well on the web that works better in apps. Things like mapping or other features like that. Video doesn't really work too well on responsive web. So which should you choose? Well, if I were you and I was in the founder situation trying to build an app, I would do an entire analysis of the marketplace, right? Do a bunch of research, figure out where everyone is. And I'm obviously bullshitting. I would not do any of that because it takes too long. So I would just make a gut decision, right? Do you go with iOS or do you go with web? Android's not an option because your budget's limited and you don't want to build with all of it. So I would recommend, iOS or web if I was to throw something out there, knowing nothing about your specific business. But however, if you've raised funding and you want to build out like a whole app on all the platforms at once, just make sure you engage with a larger agency that's going to do user testing before. There's things like paper prototyping. There's ways to get users in and test things with them before you build, which will save you a lot of time later and will help you avoid what I just talked about for cross-platform users not using your features. And that's how you choose between iOS, Android, and web. Talk to you later.